To just begin by placing your feet on the ground as if you feel this as if this is this moment of actually meeting the ground that's holding you. And you're saying, but it's not a ground, it's a floor, right? And so I'm going to ask you to meet the floor as if it was once alive. And consider, you know what it's made of. Perhaps it's wood, perhaps it's linoleum. I'm going to ask you with the bottom of your feet to connect with the original life form that this floor was. So perhaps it was once a tree. Perhaps it was once oil. Perhaps it was once something else. Can you track the material that was extracted from a live form and bring yourself into relationship with that which is holding you right now? And in the same way, can you bring your palms together and place them together? This meeting of yourself and the soul. And can you bring yourself into connection with this? Actually feeling your two palms connecting to each other and the wholeness of the circuit that happens within you when you do this. And feeling yourself both connected to self and to other. I invite you to bring your attention even deeper into the core of your being. As if you could come alive with that life force that runs through this hallway, through this tunnel of our spine. And can you imagine it moving even closer into the center of you? So now you're seeing your entire body connected from the top chakra to the bottom. And I invite you to place your hand on your belly and connect with your gut. This is, they say this is the second brain in our body. It literally has brain cells in it. There's an intelligence there. And from this gut knowing, I'm going to invite you into this knowing and this claiming of this knowing of why you're a storyteller. It's an odd question, but this claiming, can you ask your gut to give it the clarity of why you are standing at the threshold of storyteller? And perhaps it's because you have stories inside you that must be told. Or perhaps it's because there's a muse knocking at your door, begging to come through. Or perhaps you're one of those rare ones among us, the cantadoras, those who are carrying the old stories, the lost stories, the broken stories. Or perhaps you have your own reasoning. But I invite you to connect to that right now. And I invite you to bring your hand to your heart. And in this place, really connecting to, what are you in service to? What are you in service to? And I'm not speaking about your job or making enough money to do and meet your desires. I'm speaking to the path of your soul. And perhaps your soul and your heart will speak in the form of symbols, the most ancient language, the original language, the language that all dimensions can carry together. And as you claim that, I just invite you to hold that for a few more moments. I'm going to bring you a quote. And this quote comes from a well-versed writer of our time. Stories must have to be told or they die. And when they die, we can't remember who we are or why we're here. It's Sue Monk Kidd. I'm going to bring you one more quote. My cousin Helen, who is in her 90s now, was in the Warsaw Ghetto during World War II. She and a bunch of girls in the ghetto had to do sewing each day. And if you were found with a book, it was an automatic death penalty. She had gotten hold of a copy of Gone with the Wind, and she would take 3 or 4 hours out of her sleeping time each night to read. And then, during the hour or so, when they were sewing the next day, she would tell them all the story. These girls were risking certain death for a story. And when she told me that story herself, it actually made what I do feel more important, because giving people stories is not a luxury. It's actually one of the things that you live and die for. And that's Neil Gaiman. So I invite you to open your eyes and to place your, if you want to share what your gut spoke or what your heart spoke in the chat box. We have an unusually intimate space today, so it gives us a special little gift to have a little bit more time together. And what I'm going to share about what we're going to be doing in this hour is I'm going to do a very introductory class to what is sacred storytelling, what is this landscape. And we'll give you a little story recipe at the end in terms of how to create your own wisdom story. And then for those who are interested in learning more about the School for Sacred Storytelling and have questions about how you want to work with story, I'm going to stay on a little bit longer at the end and share about that. So that's what we're doing today. And I'm going to be asking questions throughout the piece, and I really invite you to answer them. I'm not just like talking to myself on that. So that's what we're here for. Now I am going to actually turn down the music. Did the music work for you? I've never actually played it before. Yeah, it's kind of nice, right? It brings a little beauty into the whole space. I was speaking to a friend of mine. She was like, I would fight for beauty. You know, that's what she stands for. She's like, I feel like it's not very important. You know, there's so many people who are doing activists and protests and all these things, and I was like, I don't know that there's anything more worthy than taking a stand for beauty. I mean, beauty is what feeds the soul. You know, it's what keeps us alive. It's what gives us the nourishment and the courage to weather all the terror. You know, I don't think there's anything more profound that you could bring into the world. And I feel like that's so much of what we do with storytelling. And I just learned something new this morning, that the word protest, when you look at the etymology of it, it's about witnessing. It's witnessing something, right? It's confusing, right? Because we kind of think it's an action, but really when we look at it, it's a witnessing of it. And it really helped me kind of doing this maneuvering dance of how do we find our place in a world that's asking for us to show up in a way that we've never had to show up for it before, when so much is crumbling and disassembling, and when really our needs are to be rebuilding and creating consciously, as Shannon was speaking to, like, what does it mean to be a conscious creator? And I feel like at the very cornerstone, we do that with our storytelling. There's nothing passive about storytelling. And not in the listening and not in the telling. And that's, if there's any piece that I find most people, it's like the great illusion of our time, that the person who holds the power is a storyteller. If they're a skilled storyteller, that's absolutely true. And I think it was Alan who spoke about this trance. Was that right? About how storytellers can put you into a trance. Absolutely, there's spell casting that's happening. There's you can be put into a trance, and some of it's delightful, right? We want to be enchanted. Please, like, enchant me, bring me into your world. But now let's look at the shadow part of that too, in terms of what's happening in the stories of our time. You know, we're looking at that. There's so much spell casting, and one of the greatest spell casts that I know is in the climate movement. And I say this very carefully, because I should tell you a little bit of my background. Is that I started off on a farm in Vermont. I was raised as like one of those wild children that got to run around and not have fences, and played with animals and had to deal with dead things, and, you know, a rural existence. And I got to know storytelling because I spent a lot of time alone. And then I started moving around, and stories became that thing that really saved my life. And I got into the performance of it when I started bringing it into and onto the stage. And I learned the responsibility of storytelling when the very first play that I wrote, which was about the suicide of my best friend in high school, won an award and was produced in a storytelling festival. And that's when I learned the responsibility of storytelling, because what you put out comes back. It's like it's like we know the science of sound, right? It's sort of like a boomerang. I'm going to put it out. This is the field. This is what we're all living in now. Okay. So what is the responsibility? What are the stories that you're going to speak out loud? What are you going to give your precious life force to? And now when we look at, I continued to understand this magic that was happening in the theater and this great responsibility, but also this like palpable energy that would happen in the theater. And I went straight to New York City and to study acting. I wanted to go to college to study acting. My parents said it was the best gift they ever gave me. They said, don't waste your time and our money studying acting in college. If you want to go study acting, go find yourself the best teacher in New York City, study acting, will support you. And when you're ready for college, we'll talk about that then. And so that's what I did. I went to New York City. I studied with Sandy Meisner. I worked off Broadway. I worked at Williamstown Theater Festival, and I got to really understand the business of storytelling in that world. And again, there was all this energy that would happen in this space, this magic. And I wanted to understand how can we, I wanted to harness it. I wanted to understand, like, how do you harness it so it doesn't just like dissipate when you're out the door? Because I had this love for environmental justice and social change, and I could feel that there was something in there. And I ended up going and getting a degree in outdoor experiential education, environmental education through performance, and continued to work as a performance artist, and eventually made my way working in the wilderness for over 7 years with youth at risk. And that's where I really began, I would say, my journey with listening. And that's the other thing I would say around storytelling, that every story begins with a very, very, very capable listener. That the listening is happening to not only the noise in our heads, but it's listening to the unseen world. It's listening for the muses. It's listening for the ancestors. It's listening for the earth speaking out loud. And it's listening for the people who are the garden, the consciousness that you, as your storyteller, are planting the seeds of your story. That's one of the things that you get to do, right? So it's like, here you have the story. And if you're a very, very skilled storyteller, your number one job is to make sure that your people are prepared to catch your story. So I'll give you a little bit of rewind back to the beginning of our time together. What was the very first thing that I did? I asked for your voices in this space, right? I made a place for you in our room. I made sure that you knew that you were seen and recognized. That's the number one job as a storyteller. In the old ways, they said that the storytellers would go from village to village, right? And they would be carrying the history, the memories, the lessons, the humor, the all of it, right? And they said that when children acted out, they wouldn't be banished from the teepee. Far worse, they would be ignored. And I think about that as a wisdom teaching, where they're saying that it was actually that being ignored by the storyteller that was considered the most painful punishment. And now think about what's happening on the ground, large scale of storytelling in our world. Think about all the people who don't see themselves in the stories. And that kind of banishment, and if not punishment, of not seeing yourself being reflected in the great stories of our time. This has actually radically changed in the last 5 years, but I mean, think about it before then. And what kind of stories, who were you raised looking at on the big screen as being recognized as being of value and having a place in our society? And what were we unconsciously bringing into our minds? So I say all that because when we come back to this idea of, wow, that thought just like flew out of my head. I'm like, come back. I was on a train. But in terms of storyteller is that ability to listen, as being your number one piece, but it's also listening for what is needed. I listen to you know, at the very beginning. And I would say that those who spoke already, I could see, have this sense of what is a sacred story, you know, and this awe for the sacred art of a story. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. But the thing that I feel is so often misunderstood is the power of the listener. That no story will be carried unless the listener is prepared. And so again, what did I do at the beginning is it was so simple, right? I acknowledged you, I listened to you, I gave a space for your voice in the room. And then I brought you into a meditation to help prepare you to be fully present to receive what we have to give today and to experience. Because storytelling is a collaborative expression. If there's anything I can tell you, if you want the quick crib note about the mysteries of storytelling, is that when you truly understand story as a mystery school, it teaches you everything about how to be human. You can't tell a story in a masterful way without being a masterful human, because it's all about connection. So it's all about creating a field of connection. I'm teaching things I don't normally teach because of who you are and what you spoke about your interests. So this is why we're going into this kind of direction. And so that field of connection is probably one of the most powerful, potent things that I understand about where the medicine can happen, where the magic can happen, where change can happen, where healing can happen. And I think of when you think of story as a temple, as a sanctuary. Now I can tell you a story. Why don't I tell you a little story? This is a story that just showed up to offer itself to you. When I first started off talking story and telling story, I remember asking a very, very expert storyteller, I was like, well, what are you going to tell tonight? And he was like, I don't know. I'm going to go and feel the audience. They're going to tell me what they need to hear. And I have come to understand that as a real truth, that when I stand before people, a story will arrive that wants to be told to them. And what I understand that's happening is that there's a listening that's happening. Your listening is actually feeding the story. And so the story will arrive for the person that listens. And so let's tell a little story. This story was given to me. It was given to me as a gift. And it was the first time I was ever made aware that a story could be given as a gift. And so I stand before you with the gift of this story as an offering to give to you. And I can't tell you the name of the woman who told me this story because her name was lost to me. And I tried to find it, and I tried to find it, and I tried to find it. And it remained lost, but her story stayed with me. And this story is about her grandmother and how her grandmother was in the Holocaust in one of the camps, and how she was sharing a cell with 6 other women, and they were hungry, and they were tired. Not just normal tired, like the kind of soul bone exhausted tired. And she realized that they needed something to go on, that the hunger was getting too much for them. And so she went to the guard of their space, and she took the last thing of value out of her jacket that had been sewn into the seam, her wedding ring. And she gave it to him. And she said, "Can you please bring us 6 eggs?" And he agreed. And he went off and he found some eggs and he brought them back to her. And he said, "I'm so sorry. There were only 5. And so she received these 5 eggs not knowing how she could possibly make a choice about who wasn't going to get one. They were all equally hungry. And perhaps it was the question, perhaps it was the wonder. But she realized there was another way. And she got a bowl and she separated the yolks from the plasma. And that day, they had facials because she gave them something larger than the hunger in their belly. She gave them their dignity back. Ayo, ay, ayo, ayo, ay. So, with a story like that, we have an opportunity to feed the story. And we can go to that place where we say, okay, where did you find yourself in the story? What did you hear? What part of the story spoke to you? You can speak out loud, you can write it in the chat box. So there's something about the tone of my voice, Sister Janelle, that spoke to you. And can you speak a little bit more about that?
Sure, and I'll just unmute myself. I think there's just something really powerful about the human voice and storytelling that, when you read a story, that's good, that's fine. But to hear someone speak it and then sing it as well, there's just something that comes through that on a page it just doesn't. So it just the tone of your voice was very hopeful and loving and like very divine. So that's what was coming through for me. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And Janelle just spoke to something that I wouldn't normally ever speak to, but we're in a class, and so I'm just going to say it. And I asked you all what you're in service to, so that you hold that in you, and that every word that you speak holds that resonance, right? It's our heart that I asked you to connect with. What's our throat? But it's the highway between our heart and our consciousness. Our tongue gets to express it all, right? And so, what am I in service to? Love and unity, connection, community, right? And Janelle just said she heard it. I didn't say any of those words in that story, but she got to hear the resonance of what is it that what am I in service to? And so I feel like that's one of the magical parts of storytelling, right? Is there's that field of resonance that is created. Anyone else want to share what happened or came alive for you?
I think for me, feeling caged in with no way out.
Mm-hmm.
And then the gift of another way.
Mm-hmm. So one of the magical, thank you, Shannon. And one of the things that's so magical about storytelling is that here we are just now, and I started creating images in my mind of a cell in a prison, right? And Janelle, you're saying that, Shannon, excuse me, you're saying that you felt yourself there. Is that okay? And so I'm creating images, deet, 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 in my frontal cortex, and in your frontal cortex, deet, 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 you're receiving images, right? You're seeing images too. Now, there's different styles of storytelling, right? Some people will say, "Oh, explain every detail. I could have painted the room. I could have told you how tall the guard was. I could have given you lots of details." It's a very effective way of storytelling. It grounds people in a place, but it's also a little bit like creating a coloring book. There's other ways of talking story, and these are different styles and techniques. No one is right or wrong. It's a matter of what is your way. So my way is much more place myself there, put myself in the energy there, and then transmit it. And so everyone has their different way, and I feel like that's some of the magic of storytelling and why you want to watch a lot of people, because a lot of people have very different skills and techniques, and your job is to find out what is the way that the genius flows through you. You can learn all the rules, so that way you know which ones to break. And that's the other thing about storytelling, is what this kind of magical thing that we just did, where we just we location traveled, we time traveled, we reality bent, we did all these different things, right? And we did that with the help of Zoom, but also we did that, with the most basic, extraordinary human technology, this kind of magic that happens, that we just did just by being in each other's presence and by speaking with intention and listening with intention. And what I'm calling magic, Princeton calls neural coupling. And so this is some of the science of storytelling and just how powerful our storytellers are, and how powerful we can be as listeners to determine what do we want to allow. Do we want to allow ourselves to open that much to allow a story to be planted in us? It's like, and so I think about that all the time as we're watching the news, we're watching the movies, we're watching all these different things, in terms of, do I know the source of that storyteller? It used to be that we always knew the source of the story. We always knew what they were in service to. We could hear it through their voice, right? Janelle said that was a big part of it, just getting to hear the resonance. I know I can feel them. My human beingness can feel their human beingness. I know whether my mind is thinking or not, if they're trustworthy. It's one of the things that is so far removed now when we're looking at all of our information on the internet. It's not just that we don't know the source of the information, it's that we don't have connection with the humanness of the creator of it. And I think it's one of the greatest challenges that we have during this time. Anything else that wants to be spoken before we move on?
I would like to say that just for me, the beauty of the pivot towards a different kind of self-care other than eating, right? Wow, that compassion was very striking to me. Yeah, I love that part.
Yeah, thank you.
In my experience, right from when you started singing, I noticed my consciousness drop from my mind more into my body, and all the self-talk kind of went away, and I noticed myself really encapsulated and engaged by every word you spoke, and you really did a good job of evoking the emotions of that person, or what that person would be feeling of the story you're telling. It was something I really admired about you telling the story. So
thank you. Yeah, so I'm going to speak to a couple more things about what did we just do, right, in terms of telling story. And the first thing is, if you watch old stories, a lot of times they'll use drums, right? And what are they doing? But they're evoking the spirit of a story, and we haven't even gone over the basic thing of what is a story, what is a sacred story. We're going to do that, but we're going to come back to that in just a moment. But they're invoking the spirit of a story. And as a storyteller, when we're talking about a sacred story, well, let's just do it right now. Well, no, first, I'm just going to show you, I'm going to tell you what I did. So that way, I'm just point this out, and that way we'll go on. So there's a moment when at some point you will determine what's your way of invoking the spirit of a story. And there's no one way to do it. There's your way. There's your relationship with your ancestors, with your muse, with the land that you live on. And it's not about mimicking another culture. It's really about deeply listening to the beings that you're in relationship with and how they want to be spoken to. When I first started, I was like, well, I don't drum, and I'm not going to learn to drum to fake this. It's like, it just felt like such a fakery for me. And I heard, yeah, that you sing. And I'm like, right, that's what happens. So like that, so there was an invocation. Some people will speak their invocation out loud. Some people will drum. Some people will sing. There's so many different things, instruments will be played. There's many different ways in. But what did we do? And Alan said it so beautifully. It's like we cleared the palette, right? We cleared the field. That's what I understand about resonance. It's like it can clear the field and make space for you to go into the temple of the story. And that's what I understand stories can be, is they can be this kind of sanctuary. We all lived in a shared experience. We're in all different places around the country, if not the world, and we went into this and we had very, very private experiences. Who knows? One of you could be the ancestor of the guard. One of you could be, the ancestor of that woman. I don't know. And that's the beauty of not having to know, is that there was this privacy that's happening in your consciousness, and you get to explore what's living in there without judgment, without story. And it's a very extraordinary thing that we get to do and come together in humans and have a shared experience in the privacy of our temples. And as storytellers, or sacred storytellers, you are the guide in that space. You're the person that can open the door. And whether people walk through or not, that's up to them. But in what do you give them access to on the other side? You can give them access to things that they might not be able to touch themselves, that might be living alive inside of them. So a little bit, Alan spoke to that moment of feeling like he was seeing that woman in there and like what she was having to tend to. And so as storytellers, what are we doing? We're evoking the story, but we're evoking the spirits that live in the story. They might come and live inside our bodies and speak through us. So we can see that, and it's such a tragic example of, who was an amazing actor who played Batman? Blonde, so talented. He was in Brokeback Mountain. You guys aren't remembering him. I can't remember his name either. Okay, anyway, very, very, very talented young actor, like just brilliant. And he was so brilliant, and he evoked the spirit of Batman, and it was like this horrific energy that seemed like it never let go of him. And he ended up having like a very freaking tragic death. And I say this because it's like when I started off in theater, and I was so touched by all the different things and ways I was learning about how to be human. And then as I went on this further down this journey, I came to this place of really making a study of spirituality. And I went to the 13 Moon Priestess School, and I started learning all about these spiritual practices and studying with all these teachers. And I was like, wait, hold the phone. It's the exact same thing. You guys literally teaching me the exact same thing, only using different language. And I was like, what's going on here? And I started studying more and more and more about it. And it goes back to, the very first known experience with an actor, Dionysus, was evoking the spirit of a god to walk on earth among us through the vehicle of his body. Heath Ledger. Thank you, Anna. As the Joker. Thank you. Thank you for making sense of what I was trying to get to. I wasn't quite close to it. And so it's this incredibly potent, I'm not going to even evoke certain words, but you could probably imagine them in terms of what it is to allow spirits to walk through you and be with you. And what happens when you actually understand that this body is this extraordinary vehicle, and you can come into, with intention, this relationship with the whole spectrum of a human experience, from ecstasy, joy, love, to hate, rage, jealousy, and you can show people these things, and you can evoke them to come alive in them. And so what does it mean that when we're a conscious guide is that we can take people into a story like that, into one of the darkest times in our modern day human history? But what did you need to know that I was trustworthy, that I would take you out and I wasn't going to leave you there? And I ask you that in yourself, because that's going to inform you about how you do storytelling. How do people trust you enough that they will open to all that lives in your story, the beauty, the horror, the tragedy, trusting that what you're doing is you're not going to take them to the darkest places and leave them there. You're going to take them there, you're going to shine a light, and then you're going to show them the way out. To me, that is a powerful story that I pray I never have to call upon. Because I figure if I'm calling upon that story, then something has gone terribly wrong. And I'm having to make what would be, unforgivable choices, but it's given me the key out of thinking that there's only one way, which I just love. So let's kind of go back into this most basic thing. We've done this class kind of backwards, which I kind of love, but you invited a depth-filled experience today. What is a story? And I'm asking, what is a story? Janelle is saying it's a shared experience. It's a life testimony, says Sarah. Yeah, I'm gonna speak in a very kind of unpoetic way. It's a moment in time. Right. So there's something about it that connects us through this experience. It's a testimony of your life, but it's like there's a journey in it, right? I went to the post office today. It's not a story. I went to the post office today and there was this woman standing in front of me. She had this big jacket and it was like fluttering back there. I could have sworn I saw a feather come out. Maybe it was a wing. Yeah, that's a story, right? I went somewhere and something happened. It's a moment in time, but it's again not just any moment in time. It's a moment in time that you're saying that there's something worthy of your language to be shared, right? So worthy of your life force to be shared. So let's think about it like this. Just speaking in terms of technology, because humans refer to themselves in latest technology. We'll call it's an operating system. And that story is an operating system where you learn your beliefs, your values, what you believe is possible. So you think about all the stories, all the children's books. I love they're rewriting the Giving Tree right now. Have you guys caught that? Thank God, right? No more acceptance of women as like beyond martyr. That all she does is give and give and give and give and give until there's nothing left. No, they've rewritten it. She's got boundaries. This is a whole new expression, right? But it's like, what are we doing? And this is why I love storytelling. There's nothing wrong with a story that was written by Shel Silverstein. It represented the moment of time that he was living in and its expression. And as storytellers, what we do is we get to be part of this evolutionary consciousness, because the stories, while the bones are always there, they can continue to grow up. And they can continue to grow up with us. So I always tell people, especially if you're one of those people that carries old stories, don't carry it blindly. Not all old people act like elders. Not all old stories should be repeated exactly as they are. Perhaps there's still a life in them that wants to continue to be here, but also perhaps there's something that needs a little bit of a costume change, a little bit of a haircut, something that needs to be redone. Okay, so we have that idea of what is a story. Now, what's a sacred story? What distinguishes it? It presents a lesson, it touches and stirs the soul, right? So we're talking about that it has a purpose. It's here to do something. It has that soul that has that little universal, I call it like the universal nod, like there's a resonance in there. It's a nugget of wisdom to be discovered. I love it. I also for whatever reason, it's that universal stir. It's like we don't speak for those who don't want to hear us. That's not what we're speaking for. We're speaking for those who need to hear us. And I think about that because what do we do? But we're evoking, we evoke an energy. The energy that is alive in us will stir and touch the energy that is alive in others. So Martin Luther King Jr., I always think about him. You know, if he was only speaking to be accepted, or speaking to make sure that, or not speaking because people didn't want to hear what he had to say, but look at how many people needed to hear his truth when he spoke about his dream. Because that dream was living in so many, and by him speaking out loud, he gave it a place to live among us, right? And it evoked so much change. So when we come to this idea of what is a sacred story, I'm coming back to this idea of, okay, so there's life living inside of it. There's a life living inside of it. It has its own mission. It connects us. I would say that when we call on the word sacred, we're speaking to something that honors and respects the divine. That's what that language is calling upon. So we're saying, I see the divine inside the story. I see the life inside the story. And so now what is it to collaborate with a sacred story and allow it to live through you? And this is where I think it's all kind of magical. I'm going to get super esoteric with you. We understand that we have a soul, right? And that we've got this body, and this body is mostly made of earth, right? And our soul comes the body is the vehicle for the soul, right? What I would say is that, let's say that there are souls out there in a way that we can't see them, and the story is their vehicle. The sacred story is the vehicle that those souls, that the spirits live inside of. Does that make sense? Sort of as a metaphoric visual. And so that's how I think of a sacred story, is it has a life that's living inside of it. And then as humans, we not only have space in our body for our soul, but we have space in our life for spirit, and spirit can live through us. Right? And so when we come into relationship with a sacred story, we come into relationship with this wild tango, this extraordinary dance between our soul and the spirit that we're coming and that we're inviting in, that's also aligned and in service to what we're in service to. So I can't think of anything more powerful and potent way to live in our times, when you understand that the stories that you carry could be carried far further than your lifetime. The oldest story on the planet is 4,000 years old. And it comes back to, and it holds the keys to understanding our fear of death. And this is pretty key, because when we go to, if we're calling this as a sacred story, let's just talk about what's on the other side, a zombie story. So what's a zombie story? And to me, that's a story that's not in service of life. If anything, it's on the take. And a quick example of that is Jaws. So Jaws came, and it was created by Steven Spielberg. It was written by Peter Benchley. We don't know why he wrote it, but we know why Steven Spielberg produced it. It was the very first film that he ever made. He wanted to be noticed. Right? He understood the psychology of humans, that we have to look at anything that threatens us. It's how we stay alive. Right? So we have to look. And then what is Jaws? What happened with the Jaws? The set broke, and the big metal shark broke, and so they were smart producers, and they just showed us pieces of it. So it instantaneously went into the realm of symbols. It was shot in the ocean. What is the ocean? It is our consciousness. It's a symbolic relationship of consciousness. Whether or not you intentionally, consciously speak the language of symbols, the language is inside of you. So what happened is that when that movie came out, it instituted this global fear of sharks, this keystone species that we are completely reliant upon for our own health and well-being. And when Peter Benchley started to see what had happened, and that there were these mass kill-offs and this great acceptance of it because of the amount of fear that had been created by his film, he spent the rest of his life trying to undo the damage and became a steward of the oceans. So I say all this because it's like good people can do great harm with their storytelling. And I would even go so far as to say that that's happened in the climate movement. And I'll bring you to the end of that part of the loop that we started a while back, which is part of my journey ended up taking me into the climate movement. And I ended up working for Al Gore's television network and produced and hosted the Green Channel there, right in the belly of how are we going to talk about climate. And I thought that we were going to talk about give them people the information, the inspiration, the motivation, the activation. I thought I had the perfect recipe, except that we saw the data and people weren't interested in information. They just wanted the stories. And that's what gave me the key out of what would be a broken world, what I would actually say is a very broken narrative, into a very different class on how that story actually pulls us much further away from our connection with the world. And it's created by so many people with really good intentions. So I say this as a warning that with your sacred storytelling goggles on, you can all of a sudden, it's like I look at it as swimming through the ocean. It's like you need to have your goggles on so you can see what's there. When you're looking at the world through your sacred story goggles, you can say, is this story giving me? Is it giving me life? Is it giving me hope? Is it giving me wisdom? Is it giving me, guidance? Is it bringing out and is it calling out life in me? Or is this story instilling fear? Is it paralyzing? Is it numbing me out? Does it make me want to get the heck out of this place? And is it telling me that humans don't belong here? And is it kind of making me want to die a little? And it can be that simple. Is this story giving me life or taking life? And so I invite you just to be powerful in your listening as well as your telling. So that was our story for today. I could talk about, you know what? I wanted to. Do you want a wisdom story recipe? Yes. Okay. So this is a wisdom story recipe. And I have a recipe book that I offer up for people that want to learn different models and techniques for how to tell different kinds of stories. And I'm going to introduce you to this one. And so a wisdom story is a story that you have, it was a bad thing that happened in your life. I'm sorry, I just said bad. Storytellers, we get to escape good and bad, but let's just say this moment sucked, and maybe it feels bad right now. It's a time, like, the more it sucked, the better off you're going to have, the more fun you're going to have, because we're going to escape out of that story. So you have to be at least a year out, 6 months. You have to be able to look back, and you have to look at it and not be right. And you have to be able to approach it with this humble mind that you don't know what the story is. Okay, you have to be willing to look at it for a bigger story. So does everyone have their idea for what it is? Kind of? Okay. So you start with this first question. And again, we're calling on a sacred story. So this isn't your ego repeating the same story that you've always told. Okay. This is now we're listening for the spirit of the story itself. Okay. So this is this humble, your job is not to know your story. Your brain has the time off. We're opening up and just deep listening, and you're allowing your intuition to guide you. And so the less you understand about what you hear or receive, the closer you are to finding what bigger truth might be living inside your story. And so what did we say? What is a sacred story? It has that universal truth. A sacred story is not, I can tell you my personal story, but it stopped being about me. It started being about you. Okay, and there's a whole journey that we go through to get there, and I'm kind of taking you to the last chapter of that process, but I teach that whole other process in other classes. So here we go. You had a sucky situation, and you're ready to make it into a wisdom story because you want to make that horrible experience worth something. First thing we're going to do is we're going to recontextualize it. You're initiated by life. Okay, life, we know that the human experience, that there are initiations. We know that we've lost most of those rituals, and it doesn't mean that you don't stop getting initiated by life. That every time you're going to grow or go through another chapter, you're going to have some kind of ego death. Something will be taken away, something will be discovered, something will be emerged, and something might even be forced out of you because through this narrow, channel that you got squeezed through by life, and there was a lot of conflict. What is birth? Conflict, right? There's a lot of tension. There's a lot of pressure. So we're recontextualizing immediately what the situation was. This wasn't about life being against you. This was about life birthing you into a new chapter. The suckiest situations can be this, right? So we've got this new context. Now, where does the story really begin? First thing that comes to mind. So I could tell you the story about when I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. But that story begins on the day when I was 4 years old, and I was looking up on the wall, and there was this tapestry that had been hand woven by a friend of my mother's. And it was of this woman that was giving flowers out to a bunch of children. And it said, "Give what you have, Leah, to someone else. It may mean more than you dare to think." And I was 4 years old, and I was barely figuring out how to read, but I was really determined. And I would look at it over and over and over again. "Give what you have, Leah." I mean, it was personal. My name was on it. And I could not make sense of it, but it was ingrained in me. And all of a sudden, 29 years later, I'm sitting in this sterile white room across the desk from this guy who just handed me this big contract that says they're going to cut across my neck, across my larynx, and there's a very good chance I could lose my voice. And all of a sudden, I knew what I had. Okay, so if I tried to be all linear and clever, I never would have made that connection, right? No, but we're talking about a story, and we're talking about the story of somebody's soul. So that's why trust that first question. That's your first guy's point. Where does the story really begin? And then trust your intuition. It's the hardest job of storytelling, is trusting that intuition, that voice that says it starts here. And you're like, no, it doesn't. It doesn't start there. It started when I got blah, blah, blah. And you're like, just don't argue with it. Just go with it. That's my greatest bit of advice. Just go with it. Okay. Now, we're all given our own universal, like there's always going to be a threshold that we're all invited to shift or transform. And we're looking at this initiation. So you might want to look at, what was this initiation about? And again, it's not your clever mind. It's your sacred storyteller mind. You're listening for the guidance that will inform you. Now, something you don't know about me is that before this time, I had had some things in my life where I had really learned the archetype of victim. And I really understood it inside and out. I'd actually almost become a sport. I could out victim story anybody in the room. And it became that way of how I identified, and how I got attention, and how I got what I needed. And all of a sudden there's this guy. It's like with this diagnosis. And it's like he's coming at me with this big purple velvet pillow with a tiara of victimhood on it. And he's like handing it out to me. And in that moment, I knew I didn't want to be that role ever again in my life. And that decision all of a sudden opened up this like invisible window in the room. And I saw the escape hatch, and I jumped through, not knowing what was on the other side. And I came back to him after he told me that there's a very good chance that I could lose my voice. And I said, "Oh, you just say that to all the pretty girls, don't you?" He's like, "You just cracked a joke?" And that's what was waiting for me on the other side. I found a way to laugh with life. And that became my job. I could have sobbed through every appointment, or I could have this simple task just to make everybody laugh. I made the nurse practitioners laugh. I made the receptionist laugh. I made myself laugh, no matter how afraid I was. And I was really, really, really afraid. I had that simple task, and it told me what to do. So again, what are we doing? We're throwing breadcrumbs over our shoulders to those behind us who are going to go through their own life initiations. And we're giving them little hints about how they might make it through. They can't follow our path, but they can be inspired by yours. Okay? Or something might come alive in them, and they might understand their own path a little bit more. So there's always going to be a fairy godmother. Okay? There's always going to be a Yoda. There's always someone outside the family system that's going to help you make it through. So wonder about what that was for you, and allow it to be the unexpected. For me, it was a garden. When I came out of that surgery, something that you might not know about people who have their thyroids removed is that they have no idea how much medicine to give you. Each body is very, very different. So they just kind of like throw something at you and watch how you respond. In my case, it was like speed. I like jumped out of the hospital. I was running around. I called up my friends and I said, "Oh, well, let's build a 70-foot circular garden." And they're like, "Leah, you're crazy. You just got out of the garden." I was like, "I know, I've got all this energy. Let's use it." And so they came over and we built this 70-foot circular garden. And then after a while, all that energy that I had, all that speed, exhausted me, and I fell into a deep, deep, deep depression. And I had just enough energy every morning to get up and walk that spiral of that garden. And every morning, I would give my gratitude. And I had never had gratitude before in my life. I didn't even know what it was. It was not trending. Oprah wasn't talking about it. That earth, that garden taught me how to be grateful. And every morning on my way out of that garden, walking that spiral all the way around and all the way out, I gave it my prayers for life. And that is what brought me to you. So again, what are you doing is you're just showing people what you learned about what it takes to get through a hard situation and the mystery of life that's revealed to you along the way. And it's not like had someone asked me to tell them my story about that, any of that would have happened, right? It was in the opening to find what is a sacred story? What is a soul story? What is a story that's bigger than me, that's about us, that we're all experiencing, right? And so the quick and dirty way that you can end your story is through a story blessing. And I learned this from Carolyn Casey, and she learned it from John O'Donohue, an Irish mystic. And it goes like this. It's if, when, if, I think. If, when, okay. If you find yourself, if you're finding a metaphor that kind of represents your story. And what is metaphor, but it's the language of spirit. Okay. So if you find yourself on a dark and stormy night, and your ship has sunk, and everything you've known is sinking to the bottom, and you're feeling the gravity of life suck you down with every breath left in you, then may a white swan appear out of the depths and carry you up and over that great ocean of water to follow the path that the moon has revealed to the shore. And may you feel your feet strong and sturdy on that shore. So what did you do? You blessed people. And they're not paying attention to that you didn't finish your story because they feel blessed. You know, and you've given them something. You've given them the gift of your story, and you've given them the gift of a blessing. So that brings us to the end of our class today. And as I mentioned, there are a couple of other recipes that I have for different stories. And that wisdom story, that's one of the classes that is in the program that I teach. So if you feel complete and you're like, I got what I came here for, I'm out, then blessings. And if you want to hear a little bit more about the School for Sacred Storytelling and how you can be part of it, I'm going to stay on for a couple of minutes and people can ask questions and I'll give all the details. So that's that. Okay. So I am so excited to share this with you because this has been 4 years in the making. And I'll tell you a little secret about how it came to be. You know, they say that, you know, prayer is when you ask for what you want, and then meditation is when it's given to you. And what I'll share is that I was spending a lot of time finishing a very big book. And in that time, I was doing a lot of listening. And I was living in the redwoods of Northern California in this little round house. And I would meditate a lot every day. And in one of those meditations, I got Myth, Magic, and Medicine, Storytelling for New Paradigm. And it was so big that I didn't go back to meditate for years. I was like, if that's what you're going to give me every time I sit down and meditate, that's kind of a big deal. And so what it was it really was the beginning modality of what's become a 19-month program. And it is a program that works with story as a sacred art and helps you understand what it is to be alive in these times, how to find your voice in these times, and how to use your voice in this time to really kind of build that bridge to the world that we most want to see. And it teaches you and provides you all the ways and ways to practice your your skills as we go along. I'm going to show you the program and do a little bit of a, and so what I would say in terms of myth, magic, and medicine is that the way that it works is that it's designed to really support you understand what are the stories, what is a story, what are the stories of our time, what is it to be a magician, to be able to be that one who can do everything we've talked about today, but to really work with being that in that creator energy. And what is it to work with story as a tool for medicine and healing for yourself and for our collective? And so I will show you the program. I'm giving you a little sneak peek behind the scenes. This site isn't even launched yet. It's probably not going to come out till next week or so. So you're getting to see what we're up to. And so this is a program that gives you an opportunity to really get to understand what is it to be a sacred storyteller in our time. And I'm not going to go through all of this, but as you understand, it's like we're really getting to understand, what is it to understand it as an ancient art? What is it to understand it as a healing art? What is it to be creatively activated? And like everything that we know about being a storyteller is that your channels, your body, your mind, your spirit is all going to be activated, engaged, and in union in order to be a really powerful storyteller. And so what does it mean and how do you do all of that? And so that is a lot of what this program walks you through. This is a video that I'm not going to bore you with right now. I shouldn't say bore you with, that's horrible. These are some of our guest teachers. We have over 30 guest teachers from around the globe. And what I would say is I am incredibly committed to having extremely diverse voices, diverse perspectives. You'll get to hear stories from different places, from different continents, but there's more than just stories. We're really talking about what does it take to heal the stories of our time, and what needs to heal inside of you in order to be carrying whole stories, if that makes sense. And so this is a little bit, you're seeing again a little bit of a rough draft, so you're seeing repeat teachers because they're still working out this. So here is the essence of the program in terms of how it works out. And so we go through these two different courses. There's these sanctuary courses, and these are the courses that are designed to be your inward journey to who you are as a storyteller, who you are as a vehicle for story. And we walk through all the different chakras of the body. And so we just did our first one, which was the sanctuary, the root chakra. What is it to be a conscious creator? What are you here to create? What's in the way of that? And this is really our foundation. And so when people come, it's like people come for different reasons. Some people come because they want to take their own healing journey. Some people come because they're wanting to be a facilitator. They're wanting to be a storyteller. They want to understand the business of storytelling. And this kind of clears out that first chakra. And let's figure out what path are you on so we can really support you on there. After every sanctuary course, these are 6-week courses, we take 2 weeks off to rest and restore, and then we come out to tell the story. And so this side, which you're going to see, is all the story skills classes. And so these are where you get to learn, like specifically, like we just talked about a wisdom story. In this case, you would actually have an opportunity to come out to create your own wisdom story, to write it, to practice it, to get feedback, to workshop it, and then to tell it at our mini storytelling festival, which happens at the end of each story section. So the one that's happening, and we start next week, is Mythos. This is one of my favorite classes, and it's all about your personal creation story. So what is your origin story? You've probably heard indigenous origin stories from around the globe. This is like coming back to like what's the origin story of your soul? What are the archetypes that are living through you? What are the symbols that live through you? What is the soul purpose, and how can it be told in a metaphorical, mythological way? So we're going into the mythic imagination in this story, in this class. I love this class. We'll take a 2-week break. Actually, we're going to take a holiday break. Is what's going to happen then. And we come back to tell the story of Eros. So for those of you who miss Sanctuary, that's okay, because we're actually going to do a 6-day intensive in January. So you can catch up. You will not be lost in any shape or form. And then in February, we start with Eros, our second chakra. We're really looking at stories of sexuality and creativity. That's what that whole chakra is about. And so this one really gets you into that place of getting to understand what are the stories in you that want to be released, that are ready to be told, that are asking to be healed. And all along the way, we use the creative process to get to it, to have fun with it, to play. And that's what we're doing here. It's like we are entering into an advanced skill of play. And so many of us don't know how to practice that technique anymore. And play is where we learn, it's where we expand, and it's where we can find the truest expression of who we are outside of, the confines of a system that is so based on consumerism. So I'm not going to go through all of this because you can see how it works. Then we take 2 weeks off, we come out and we tell our wisdom stories. We go back in, we come out for that core, what is the power and purpose? Getting right into what is your power and purpose, what's blocking it. Let's make sure that you can speak with potency, with power, with the fullness of your expression. So it goes back and forth. We end with, we work through the heart, love of self, love of other, love of land. Our guest teachers are off the hook. I'm so excited for them. They're going to also kind of push at the edges of what you think about and how you live with things. And then the Speak Your Spark is all about using your voice with purpose in the world. So around, if there's something that you really care about and you want to protect, that class focuses on that. And then vision stories. And to me, this is like the apex of that course, because we need more vision stories planted in the world. So this goes into more detail in terms of, so that you can actually see more about each of these classes. And what I'll say right now is that the program is designed as a whole, but if you're saying, oh, I just want to take this one class, you can do that. You can take just a module. What I will say is that, and many people start off with one module and they continue. What I'll say is that there's something really powerful about commitment. When you commit to yourself to go on the whole journey, that commitment holds you to get the most out of the program, because you're going to come across your own edges and your own bumps and your own place of expansion. And you have these people that are there that are super committed to you. And so I'll just point out a couple more things about what we've got in this program. You get those unique sanctuary self-exploration models. And while I take you through each journey, you also have 5 guest teachers who expand your thought process on what you're tending to and give you more skills and techniques. In our story skill building classes, we have people who are going to teach you. Those are the classes where we're going to get more into the technique and craft of storytelling. And what I love about this is that there are some teachers where they're going to teach you your modality, and then you're going to repeat their modality. That's how I was taught acting. I studied Sandy Meister's technique, and I act through his technique. And that's brilliant. And there's really something to be said for that. To me, I feel like in this time in the world, what the evolutionary moment is for us to actually find the authentic essence that's living inside of us and how it wants to be lived and expressed. And it's something that we don't have a lot of places to do. And so I will teach you my techniques, and that's great. But I was also very committed to making sure that you get to be exposed to a lot of different kinds of techniques, and so that you can really understand where does your craft want to emerge, and what is the unique genius that lives through you, and how does it want to be expressed. And for me, having a big buffet and a lot of different pieces to nibble on, you get to see, oh yeah, that is my thing. And it's really powerful to also learn something that's not your thing, because you're like, that's really my thing when you feel it. The thing that's very unique about this course is that we also get 5 full-day story ceremonies. So this is where you get to really experience story as a healing modality. We're going to work with some old stories. We're going to work with new stories, and you'll get to, it's a very, very unique thing to this program to get to experience it. We do it live and online. Most of everything's online. The other thing that you have is ongoing group of greatness. This is your peer group. So for every course, you get to work with 3 or 4 other people who are really committed to you, to commit to witnessing your process. And it's really something else to be in a group that's committed to your greatness. So there's a very specific way that we work together that supports the creativity, that supports the expansion, that supports the risk taking. And so in these kinds of classes, you're not going to be ripped apart. You're not going to be critiqued in that way. I will actually do some story coaching for people where you'll get that really supportive guidance. But as a way of being together, we're really like, our job is to be like, where is your greatness living, and how can I support it being called out? And I'll tell you, this is a part of the program that people love, and I've seen these people stay in relationship together for years after the programs. Who is this program designed for? You know, it's really for people who want to show up in these times. Is what is the quick and dirty way. You know, it's like you say, I really want to show up, and I understand that my voice is one of the most powerful things I can use in this time. And so, you know, all the ancient religions agree that the world was sung, spoken, and chanted into existence. Right? It's like that key to our human, like what we're here for. And so this is, you know, you can read all this stuff later. I'm not going to go into this, but I think I said enough about who it's for. The program is online, and I'll just say that again. It's 11 modules, and you can. It's designed as a circle, so we'll keep going around. So it's like even if you were to come in at Eros, you could still come in and make your way all the way through. And so some people that want to make their way through will find their way. You know, finishing not at the beginning of the cohort, but kind of having their own way. And for those who want to really complete this and go on to become facilitators, I do have a certificate program, and we're going to be integrating a facilitator training program. So that is this. Here you are in the free masterclass. And I think the thing to me that's very different about this program than, I mean, I think probably all storytelling schools, if they're a storytelling school, then they're bringing you into relationship with spirit, you know. And to me, this is what really holds this: is how do we be in relationship to our times? And so it's like, how do we be in relationship with the ritual of storytelling? So you'll get to learn earth-based practices. You'll learn different kinds of sacred storytelling modalities. You'll specifically get to work with a story as a healing modality. A lot around opening your channels, how to access the muse, how to come into that deep trust, how to develop your confidence. Those are some of the biggest pieces that you'll walk away with. This, you will feel like a rock star, totally confident in both carrying a lot of stories, but also knowing how to weave one out of the moment. So you'll get to work on your improvisational skills, your communication skills, your collaboration skills. It's all there. And then in that, you know, you can't help but come more into relationship with your body, with your practices, with your disciplined mind. And I think one of the pieces that's really important to me is, in a world that's begging us to get more and more simplified and dumbing so much down, is that we don't do that here. It's like we really build those muscles of how do we live with complexity? How do we make space for all different kinds of diversity? I talked a little bit about the story ceremonies and workshops and what those are going to be. These guys are just working their way through here. And so these are those. And so we'll be working on the story of health. That's actually being rescheduled for January. And we'll be working on love next April, you know, in terms of what's your story of love and how is it being lived through you. We'll talk about how to work with story in terms of trauma, which is what Tell a Bigger Story is focused on. And the story of a witch, it's a really potent story ceremony that is all around that haunting story of that so many people are working with, that if they speak out, they could be, you know, killed. And so we're working with, like, how do we heal these old stories and return people to their relationship and feeling safe with their relationship with the natural world. We're going to take on the story of scarcity, you know, which is this very pervasive and dangerous story in our world. And we're going to really look at, like, how is this story and how can we heal it in our own lives and in the collective. And then we'll also be going into one of the oldest fairy tales and looking at how do we heal a broken story. And then our last one, this is our initiation, which will be endings and beginnings. So again, with the way that this program is designed is that you can say, yes, I'm all in. I really want to step so fully into myself as storyteller and as sacred storyteller, and want to really step onto the path of mastery and be exposed to all these different stories. Or you might say, I want to take one class, or I want to come to one story ceremony. And so that's available to you as well. one of the pieces that is also built into this program is how do we heal one of the biggest stories of our time, which is overdoing and exhaustion. So I'm going to tell you a secret. This whole program could be done in a year. But when I looked at what it would take for us to do the whole program in a year, and it was really important for me to have people get to have a truly comprehensive experience where they would walk out so whole and complete in their expression as a storyteller with so many stories to carry, that it's having that integration and rest and breaks was so important. So we actually have like real holiday breaks, real summer breaks, times where we can really rest and integrate and work with the seasons. It's how do we create this new story of sustainability? And then one of the other things that we have that as a student you get free access to our members only online community. And so this is for people, we got out of the Facebook realm and we went into what's called Mighty Network. Some of you might be familiar with that platform. And that is where we get to hang out as a community and where we get to really dive in deeply into this expression. What I love about Mighty Networks is it means that I'm not just the one in charge, you guys can be in charge. So let's say that you are a big fan of Rumi. You can start your own room on Rumi in our community. One of the benefits of the open space is that it's a living library. So one of our first assignments for Mythos, which is coming up next week, is to learn an origin story, a creation story, or an indigenous myth. And we have a library where people can actually write down their sources so that we have this living place so as a group, we always have more and more access to more and more stories. There's it's also a place where you can tell your stories and be in relationship to finding out what's happening in our world and all that. And our members only, in the paid part of the community, we have a weekly writing group where you can have creative prompts and write together. We have a monthly book reading club where you can study a book together. We'll do story jams where anyone can sign up and be part of a story jam. It's actually probably in our free part as well. And then I also do open office hours twice a month. So anything that you're working on, whether that is in the career of your storytelling or in a story that you're working on, you can bring that into that situation, and we can, as a collective, listen to it and work with it that twice a month outside of class time. And then for all those who finish, they receive a certificate of completion, which then brings you to a place of being available to become a facilitator and a paid facilitator in the school. So that is the program. The tuition for the 19-month program as a whole is $5,000. And you guys are kind of lucky because we haven't fully launched it. Our early bird special officially ended yesterday. But if you're like, oh my God, I totally am yes, and I want to be part of this program, you can get a $600 early bird special. I'll still extend that to you guys for the rest of today. And then for people who want to it doesn't apply to you, but basically we'll take another $200 off if you do one-time payment, and then you can split it up into annual payments or into a monthly payment plan. And so that is how the program works. And then you can just, it's just more and more. I'm gonna stop that now. Are there any questions that you have? Okay. So we will send you, there's 2 classes that are coming alive right now. There's today, if you, welcome Janelle to Mythos. Okay, then email me and we can set you up. Yeah. There's today, Tanglewood is actually, it's not in the 19-month program, but it's in the School of Sacred Storytelling, and it's actually the story of Sleeping Beauty. And Jacqueline is an extraordinary teacher from Australia, and she's walking people through this story and showing how it's living through your life. And so it's an old way of working out your mythic imagination in that way. And then Mythos starts next week, where it's much more designed for you to tell your own story. So that's what's happening right now. All right, you guys are good listeners. That was a lot to take in. If there are any questions, I'll stay. Otherwise, we can all take ourselves off mute and say farewell and have a great day.
Thank you so much, Leah.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank
Thank
you
you,
so much.
Leah.
Really much.
Amazing.
Take good care.
How many hours a week would like how much time I'm just with I have quite a bit on my plate right now, and it's
Yeah.
something that I'm very, very interested in, but so I'm just wondering how
Yeah.
much time.
That's a great question. So we meet in terms of as a class in these 6-week modules, we meet once a week for a 2-hour class. And that's
Oh.
live. And so that is, it's like, you'll never hear me talk this much ever again. It's like, that's it. And those classes are highly interactive. You're doing exercises, you're working in small groups. Not everyone can come to the live classes. I always say it's way better to come because it's so much more fun. But for those who can't come to the live classes, if you want, you have those small groups. And so those small groups can meet outside of class, so you can still do all the exercises. What I do is at the beginning of every class, we do the self-assessment, which is how much time, like where's my win in this class? And so some people will say, my win is if I watch every recording when I'm out for a walk. I received. That's what I have capacity for. Someone else might say, my win is to create 2 stories in this class, and I'm going to come to every single class, and I'm going to meet with my group outside of class, but you don't have to meet with a group unless you want to. It's really up for you. And I'm going to come to every guest teacher. And some people say, I'm going to watch those guest teachers next year when I have more time. It's like what I do is I create a big buffet, and then I say, determine what your diet is so that you can have a great experience. Does that make sense? So in terms of like bare minimum, I would say 2 hours in class, and then you are asked to usually have like a 30-minute assignment outside of class.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah, thank you for answering.
Okay. Great.
Alrighty.
All right.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Bye now.